Welcome, everybody. This is the Rich Life Podcast. We are going to be talking about the topic of relationships. I know we try to touch upon this topic one out of every 3 or 4 episodes because your spouse and the people you hang out with most are pretty prevalent, right, from time to time. Today, we're going to be going back to the basics. We prescribe to John Gottman, a pretty renowned relationship coach out there, where he talks about the 4 horsemen, the 4 things to avoid. And today we are going to be talking about defensiveness. And this is actually something that me and my wife, we've gone through this training together and we are able to spot out these words. And we call ourselves out on it. Sometimes we're pissed off when we do it to each other. And sometimes it's out of jokingly fun. I think awareness for a lot of this stuff, they say about awareness, once you have awareness, there's no going back. But once you break down what defensiveness is, let's talk about some strategies.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up to the first installment that we did of the 4 horsemen, which is from the Gottman Institute, right? The Gottman method. And the 4 horsemen, in short, these are the 4 things that are the predictors of whether or not a relationship or marriage will make it. Right? Just a quick review. The Gottmans studied like around 10,000 couples, and they came up with these 4 horsemen that are very useful, being able to predict with close to 90% accuracy whether or not a relationship will make it. And they're able to predict this even just after watching a couple argue for a few minutes.
When I first heard that, I thought that was wild, right? Because we're
Yeah.
both like life sciencey kind of guys, right? Math and science. And I always wondered, like, how the heck do you do that? But I haven't confirmed this, but likely what they probably do is they have a notepad and then they tally up one of these 4 things. Today we're going to talk about defensiveness, and they compare with all the other couples that eventually don't get divorced or do. I didn't tell my spouse, I just did it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, sure enough, it happened.
Yeah.
When you're aware of it, I do it all the time too. I'm not going to say that I'm an angel, but yeah, like people, when you exhibit these 4 things and you see it easier in other people, always, you understand where this becomes a bit of a science.
My wife and I do that too, because we went through the Gottman method. So now when we witness other couples argue and fight,
right? Because
it's
you already
funny.
know that they're not coming back.
We'll see defensiveness or we'll see contempt or criticism. My wife and I would just give a glance to each other because we both are recognizing at the same time, and we would give each other a look. Once you got awareness, then there's no going back.
So what is defensiveness? Give us a couple of examples. And
let's dive into it. Defensiveness is the second of the 4 horsemen. So the first horseman, again, we talked about is criticism, but defensiveness is what the name suggests. It's typically a response to criticism, and it's a self-protective mechanism. Right? It's an attempt to protect yourself or to assert your innocence when someone is criticizing you, and a way to fend off what you perceive to be an attack against you. Right? Research shows that defensiveness rarely has the desired effect of actually improving the situation. In fact, it oftentimes makes it worse because defensiveness is almost a counterattack. It's really a way of blaming your partner. You're in essence saying like the problem isn't me, it's you. Like, what are you talking about?
Or it's just you don't feel like you're in a safe space. Both people don't feel they're safe, so they have to protect themselves as opposed to being out there and being tempted.
Right.
So let's get a little bit more personal here, Paul, because this manifests in all different ways. Like how do you exhibit defensive? Like, what do I need to say to you to get you triggered? I think maybe what gets me is like when my spouse, I feel like they know me the best, but when they like misinterpret what I'm trying to do and label something, that's when I get defensive. And yeah, exactly to what you said earlier, it is attack against my inner person, right? Who I am deep down. And that's why it hits a tender spot, because there is some truth to it, or I believe that there's some truth to it.
A lot of these situations were more likely to occur if they touch upon something sensitive, right? So for a lot of us, that will mean some sort of trauma from childhood that we're still holding on to. A personal example I'll give is go visit my own mother. A lot of our folks can relate. Parents really know how to push our buttons, right? Because they're the ones who installed them, right? if I get even what I perceive to be a criticism from my own mother, this could be something to the effect of, oh, a shame that you're not practicing clinical medicine anymore. It could be some sort of comparison to my brother who is still practicing clinical medicine. Because that touches on a childhood wound, much more likely to react to that in a very defensive manner. Like I'll just snap back, not be very pleasant. Definitely taking me a while to train myself to not overreact, right? Just to have this third person perspective, but it's still very hard. I must admit, still work in progress.
But that's a good tactic for many things. This included having that third person perspective. Or what I've also heard is when you're in a nervous situation, think of yourself in third party and then zoom out. Think of where you are in terms of the city, the country, the world, the solar system, and it recenters you to some extent. Somebody said something to you that is not the nicest thing and it's triggering to you, but it helps recenter a little
Correct.
bit.
So zooming out, I think trying to be in that third person perspective is one strategy. I think another one, and it goes to the official antidote that the Gottmans talk about for defensiveness, is take responsibility. Even if you don't feel like it, just remember you can't always control what the other person is doing, but you can control how you react to it. It doesn't mean be a doormat, but it means that you ultimately have the power to decide how you react to something. And that's actually really empowering, right? Because then it gives you the agency, the power to determine how you interpret things and then how you react to it.
In another way too, it's if you said something to me and I'm like, touche, Paul,
Yeah.
you're right. I gotta work on that. But
Yeah.
I got on the list and we're working on it. It's taking ownership in a way of
Mhm.
what was flung over the fence at you.
Yeah. And you don't have to necessarily agree to it, but I think especially when dealing with relationships, or I think it is really important to try to even see if there's a kernel of truth to what the other person is saying. Right? You don't have to agree totally, but it goes a long way just to own up to something that you did.
I think that might be level 7 or level 10, right?
Yeah.
But I think what you don't want to do is start to get into, oh, you said that? Oh, I'm gonna send this right back at you, right? To get into this ping pong battle. That's what you don't want to do.
That's correct.
Which usually, now I think about it, that's what happens, right? In most of these cases.
Yeah, it's very easy to go into the whataboutism, right? So if you get an attack, let's say you came home really late one night, right? So a very common defensiveness tactic is, what about you the other time? You're no angel yourself. What about the other time? You didn't tell me you were coming back so late. That's pretty common, right? Another common defensiveness tactic is like playing like the innocent victim, right? You think I meant to be late? I wasn't late on purpose. Why are you so uptight? Why are you always picking on me?
Yeah.
I can't do anything right. I'm not good enough for you.
Yeah. It's if you and I were playing Street Fighter and I fired a fireball at your face, it's either your first example would be reflecting it right back at me. And then what you did the other time was you deflected it. In a way, we said earlier, what you're trying to do is absorb the fireball, take some ownership over it. Certainly don't fire it back out at the other person, but
Yeah.
it's hard. You just fired a fireball at my face, right?
Yeah, it is. It is very hard, right? The Gottmans did notice that even in the most successful relationships, the most successful couples, the four horsemen do happen. The most successful couples recognize it early and they're able to come back with these antidotes, right? So it's okay, two men perfectly fine to be exchanging fireballs for a few rounds, but hopefully you will recognize this pattern going on, recognize like the ping pong ball going back and forth. I'm sorry for being late, for not calling you. I'll try to do better next time. And then you just completely lower the temperature. Hopefully it goes both ways. It needs to be reciprocated.
I think you're exactly right. I just think that when you're in the heat of the moment to do those types of things that you're
Mhm.
doing, takes a very wise old soul to do that. I guess something that I'll do is when a fireball gets fired at somebody's face and euphemism has set in, we will call out that word using the Gottman dictionary here, defensivism. And then we have this preset thing where if one of these four horsemen come up, it's at least to take a mini break. Sometimes that break only lasts 1 second and we keep firing fireballs at our face, but it just some awareness to, hey, we're
Yeah.
both going down a place that we don't want to go. And maybe no different than some people with, oh, shoot, there's 10 holes in the wall because we threw things at each other. Perhaps we should stop now. But this
Yeah.
catches the escalation before it gets going and at least sets the terms that way.
Yeah, the timeouts are like really helpful because in the heat of the moment, the The cortisol levels, like the stress hormones, they're on overdrive, and neurologically, you're not able to think in such a way to be able to be more enlightened and to be able to actually resolve this conflict. So I think that, yeah, taking that break if necessary, or even asking your partner, hey, can you give me a few? I think is really helpful, really important. And it's also important for the other person in the couple to respect that wish, take a few minutes break instead of to keep on attacking, right? Because we are our physiology, and unfortunately there's no escaping that in the heat of the moment. And an interesting side note is that when the Gottmans, when they were studying these like 10,000 couples, they also attached heart rate monitors and tested their physiological markers. Interestingly, they found that during fights, women in general, their heart rates, respiration rates return to normal faster than men. And I think there's interesting theories why that is. And I think anthropologists, it's because of natural selection, right? So back in the days when we were like cavemen and women, right, roaming the earth, it behooved the men to have elevated stress hormones, elevated levels of alertness, right, while they're in the bushes, like waiting to spear that,
Buffalo or deer or whatever.
exactly, right? But for women who tended to be back at the camps, tending to the fires and the children, that trait of having elevated alertness and stress hormone, that wouldn't make sense. Like you want your body to be able to go back to a calm state relatively quick. So that's an anthropological theory as to why women in general arguments, their physiology returns to baseline quicker than men. This is an important thing for both men and women to know. For the women out there, recognize that it probably will take them longer to get back a calmer, more rational state.
Yeah, it creates a situation where one kind of revs up, but if you get the other one to go to the RPMs could be higher and stay longer there, and that's not
Right.
good when you get both in that state.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not whether you're a guy or a girl, physiological. It's not anybody's fault. Just what's defensiveness? You always get so worked up. Shoot, that's natural, right?
Yeah, because that's our quote unquote monkey brains. That's our primitive brains. It's actually, we're actually designed that way to protect ourselves, to keep us safe. But unfortunately, the monkey primitive brain is not designed to make us feel happy and
Yeah,
fulfilled.
a really good product that they could make, like with your Apple Watch. Like anytime you're in like 40 feet of your spouse, because proximity, that's the easy part. People can code that if one or two of the heart rates go up, that it just emits these noise canceling things where it's like you're arguing, but you can't even hear the other person because noise canceling. You can say all this garbage and nobody hears anything until the beats per minute come back down. Right. Or if some of you guys are very rich out there, you can have just somebody just sitting there playing referee or yeah. I guess that's what marriage counseling is for too, right? Like
Right.
in a way you have a referee around and then you have these controlled quarrels. But
Yeah, you and I should make that happen.
yeah, that's the product that we should make. Yeah, or it's an app. People are like, I'll be damned if you listen to me while we're arguing. I hate to tell you, everybody, they're already recording you and they got your social security number. It's already too late, guys, but we might as well work on the relationship. And guess what? You're not a special snowflake. Everybody goes through it too.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we try to give out practical high yield advice on this stuff. I think the four horsemen I think these are like very high yield practical tools for folks because let's be honest, we all do this. None of us are immune to this. If this doesn't happen to you, then you're probably not spending that much time with your significant other.
You need to get more mileage on the car. That will close the door on this intro into defensivism. We suggest checking out that book or the content on the Four Horsemen by John Gottman.
Yeah.
And we'll pick up the other two horsemen in a future episode. Thanks, guys. And please share it with a friend or listen to this with your spouse. I think there's no better way of learning together, having open mind. If you're a spouse who doesn't listen to podcasts and your spouse does listen to podcasts, you probably just made their freaking day by making it this far in the podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, made their day. Normally that doesn't happen. Non-podcast listener spouses never listen to the podcasts that the podcast listener sends their spouse. That's a keeper. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.
See you guys next time.